going to pop myself on the screen here. So I'm Krista, and I'm going to be your tutor for today. As I said, I think some of you are in the morning session already, and some of you I think might be returning from last week as well. So we're going to get started in just a moment. I'm just going to quickly, because I think we've got a lot of people here. We've got 12 people here already. So let me just get up the roll call here, and I'm just going to check who is already with us. So I'm going to see a few names. Let me just check. So Kayla, Cornick, Lily, yes, Georgia. Ruby, Amelia, and Juliana. Okay. So there's a few people still to come, but that's okay. We're going to get started anyway. Now this morning it seems like there was a little bit of confusion about what I was teaching in terms of I wasn't super aware that on the website it actually has advertised that the morning class is just about faces and the afternoon class is just about bodies and poses. So I'm going to stick with what is on the website. So this afternoon we will be mostly working on bodies and poses, but I will still touch on some stuff about faces. So, and especially if you were here this morning, we mostly did examples using faces. We mostly went through quite a lot of facial features and that kind of stuff. We're still going to talk a little bit about that in terms of what the general kind of proportions are and how to construct faces. But we're going to go a bit more into bodies this afternoon. So bodies and poses is going to be the main focus. Okay, that's what was advertised on the website. That is what we are going to do. All right, before we get stuck in, I will just very briefly say who I am. So as I said, my name is Krista. I'm a tutor at Sydney Art School. I teach some of the kids classes and quite a lot of the adult classes. And I'm also an illustrator myself. So I tend to do picture books and illustration for that kind of thing. And I don't do heaps of anime, but I do personally really love anime. So I very much enjoy talking about it. I love drawing it. And I'm going to enjoy explaining it to you. Now, throughout the course as well, I've got examples that I'm going to show you, and we're going to talk about those examples. But there is going to be the opportunity, if you have a specific character that you want to work on, there is the opportunity for you to sort of have a go working on that character yourself. So you don't have to do the exact same examples as me, but in terms of the construction of things, so the step-by-step, that is going to be the same, whether you're working on your own example or whether you're working on the example, the same example that I'm working on. I'll explain a little bit of the format in terms of how we're going to work today. So first thing, just setting up Zoom. I'm sure everyone's very familiar with this. Currently everybody is muted, but do feel free to, if you want to ask any questions, you can unmute yourself to ask questions. You can also put anything in the chat. I will check in from time to time with you anyway. And so if you just want to give me a wave or a thumbs up, or if you want to show me your work, probably just flag it in the chat to make sure that I'm aware that you're trying to show me something or trying to get my attention. And that's mostly what we were doing sort of today and last week, was using the chat to communicate. So it's probably the easiest way to go about it. Now, in terms of you sharing your work with me, So there's a couple of different options. One way is for you to take photos of your work and then email it to me. And that's my email address, krista.brennan@sydneyartschool.com.au. A few people this morning were sending emails, I think just like replying to the confirmation email that they got from the school for booking in for this session. That's not my email address. So if you send it there, it doesn't get directly to me. So you're better off sending it to this email. And I'm going to just put that in the chat now as well so that everybody has it, sydneyartschool.com.au. Let's check that's right. There you go. So that's my email address is in the chat. Usually what I like to do is sort of bring the images up into Photoshop, and I'll show you in a second how I'm going to be drawing today as well using Photoshop. But if you prefer your images not to be shown to the rest of the group, then you can also just hold them up in your chat window, or if you send an email to me and just let me know that you want me to have a talk about it and critique it, I'm happy to do that as well. Because there is so many of you, and because we don't have heaps and heaps and heaps of time, there's not that much kind of detailed critiquing that I can go into, but I can certainly give you some advice based on the work if you would like that. Okay. Now, in terms of materials, I think most of you are probably going to be drawing with just pencils and on paper today. So my recommendation would be graphite pencil and an HB or a 2B. And a mechanical pencil is also a good idea. I like a mechanical pencil for my own illustrating because it's always sharp and you never have to sharpen it. And that's always very good. And it means you get a nice crisp line. In terms of erasers, I would say definitely have a kneadable eraser if possible. Does everyone know what a kneadable eraser is? Yep, most people nodding. If you're not familiar, it looks like blue tack, but it's actually an eraser. And the reason that's really good is because there's usually a lot of sketching that goes on, especially if you're trying to work a character from imagination, or you're trying to adapt a character from an image. You're probably going to do a fair bit of sketching. And a kneadable eraser just means you can take off some of the drawing without taking off all of the drawing. If you've got a tablet or you've got digital tools that you want to use instead, by all means, you can use those. And that's what I will be using today. I'll be using a drawing tablet and Photoshop. We probably won't get to any coloring in, but if we do, then by all means, you can use colored markers or acrylic paints or colored pencils or whatever kind of coloring tool you normally use. I would say with anime, with a particular style of drawing, generally the kind of favored colored markers are the Copic markers, if you're familiar with those, but they are very expensive. And I think there are other brands available as well, but Copic was sort of the original brand of marker that everyone was using for a while there. All right. So this is all the faces that we were mostly doing this morning, but the characters that we're looking at here do still apply. And the big thing that I was talking about this morning with faces was just looking at the way that different kinds of facial expressions and also different kinds of facial designs tell you something really important about the character. And that's true with bodies as well, which we'll get into a bit more this afternoon. Let me just scroll ahead to the bodies. As I said, we will touch a little bit on faces. We'll cover faces again, but mostly about bodies this afternoon. So first example here, my neighbor Totoro. If you're familiar with Studio Ghibli, which a lot of you probably are, Studio Ghibli did My Neighbor Totoro, but also Spirited Away, and lots of other different films. Princess Mononoke is my other favorite. But it's a very old style in the sense that he was first making anime in the sort of 70s and 80s. So it's one of the earliest forms of anime. And I think that there's a particular kind of a particular style that's very recognizable from this era. If we have a look at Dragon Ball as a counterexample by Akira Toriyama, the two different character designs are saying two very different things about these characters. And that's sort of the first thing that I was saying. When you, even from the perspective of thinking about how to put your character together, it's not just about saying, I want to have a character who's an action hero or a shoujo, or I want to have a character who's, you know, a cute little girl. You might have a character idea in your mind, but every aspect, every part of the character that you design is going to say something about that character. So the comparison between Mei here from Totoro and versus Goku from Dragon Ball, on the right hand side we've got a characters that are at a similar age, but if you look at the differences between their eyes, their face shape, their body shape, their posture, they're saying two very different kinds of things. Even as a small kid, you can see Goku is a fighter and Mei is just an adventurous little girl. And then having a look, so I mentioned in the last session as well that this course that we're doing today is anime and manga, and those are two distinct terms, which most of you are probably familiar with, but just in case you're not, anime is the animated version of things, so that is television and movies, and manga is the comic book version. It's the physical version of things. So it can be digital as well, but it's the non-moving part, I guess. And then you also have anime, or at least anime style art, that has gotten into computer games and card games. And we'll come to that a little bit later. Sorry, I just muted myself there. I had to have a bit of a cough. I've been talking all morning, so my voice is starting to go a little bit. All right. If we're looking here at Legend of Zelda, so we're looking at the character of Link. You can see the difference even within this particular character. We have a character who on the left-hand side is more kind of realistic and grown up and has adult or at least teenage body proportions. And then on the right-hand side, we have the chibi style character. So chibi style character being the more sort of cutesy character. And that's characterized by larger head, smaller limbs, so really small stylized hands and legs and feet, and all of the facial proportions then also being more exaggerated. So the eyes are even bigger than usual, and the nose is even smaller and less refined than usual. And this is meant to be the same character. I mean, interestingly, in the story, this is meant to be the same character only a couple of years apart as well, but two different worlds. Anyway, we won't go into the story of Legend of Zelda. Now, if we look at Pokemon, so mentioning anime and manga, that has moved into card games and moved into computer games as well. And thinking a little bit about Pokemon, and also Yokai Watch is another example. Thinking a little bit about Pokemon and the character design also then touches into the animal design. So Pikachu being the sort of example of one of the original Pokemon, and certainly the focus of the very original Pokemon kind of series. But all of these elements of character design that we're going to be looking at in terms of people, a lot of it still applies to character design that you might do for any other kind of creature. So whether it's an animal, or whether it's a spirit, or whether it's some kind of mythological creature, there's still a certain sense of what makes it cute and what makes it look anime-ish. We're having a look now at One Piece. And so with all of these, it's really pointing out just how much variety there is in character design, in facial features, in body proportions, and in the way that these characters are designed. There's so much variety, but it's all recognizably anime. So to say that anime is just one thing or just one style of art, I think is not true. But in terms of what defines anime, then it's not even necessarily that it's made in Japan. I mean, that certainly could have been considered one of the characteristics, but there are examples of anime, which I mentioned in the last class as well. A great example would be Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra. Both of those would be considered anime, but they came out of a Western and American production company. So from the perspective of saying anime equals Japanese is also not true. And more than that, there are just heaps of anime artists now who are all over the world. I've even seen some videos of particularly good anime artists who are in Germany and they've got really thick German accents when they're doing their tutorial videos. So it's more about a specific kind of look, but the look has a lot of variety. So the way that one of the ways that I would define it certainly is by saying that there's a kind of stylization that makes anime. A lot of it has to do with, I think, the eyes, how much or how little detail or how stylized the eyes are, and then how much or little detail goes into the nose and mouth. And there tends to be kind of a smoothness and a general kind of, like, the characters don't tend to have a lot of blemishes. They don't tend to have a lot of variation. They tend to, the colors tend to be a little bit more flat. And there's a almost romantic quality about them, I would say. Now I have a look at My Hero Academia, which in terms of character design, if we're looking at individual facial features and body structure, proportions, the design of the clothing, I think it has a fair bit in common with something like Pokemon or even Naruto. It's from that shoujin sort of style of anime, which is about boys having adventures, is one way I think you could describe it. Boys having adventures, yeah. All right. So we're going to get stuck into doing some examples now, and we're going to look at how to kind of decode the body, so how to break it down: head, shoulders, rib cage and hips, and then arms and legs and so on. But before we do, I just want to talk a little bit about what we're looking at and how we're going to break it down. So the big shapes of the body: rib cage, head and hips. And we'll talk a little bit about the construction of the head soon, but mostly I just want to point out to you that there is this big volume in your upper body, in your chest, and that's your rib cage, connected by your spine to your hips and shoulders. And if you have a look at the examples that I've given here, we've got arms and legs coming out of the sides of the shoulders. The arms are coming out of the sides of the shoulders and the legs coming out of the sides of the hips. So they're not coming out from the middle of the body. They're coming out from the sides, the width of the shoulders and the hips. And that's really important to make sure that your character has the right kind of structure. Then elbows and knees, I've got both of those as being triangular. And the reason for that, I'm specifying that is because a lot of people tend to draw them as circles. And I personally think that's a bit of a mistake. I think generally, if we go to, for example, here, looking at Luffy, you can't see his knees, but we can see his elbows. And you can see that there's a straight line coming from the shoulder to the elbow, just one direction. And then from the elbow to the wrist, a second direction. But if you have a look at that elbow, you notice very triangular kind of shape. And that's because the joint is triangular. If we have a look at a knee, can we find someone's knee to look at? May's knee, sort of. Hang on. Everyone's wearing shorts. It's really hard to see anybody's knees. Have a look at your own knees. No, you can kind of get a sense under here somewhere that there is more of an angular shape at the very least, even if you can't see the triangle of the kneecap. This is very much a kneecap shape. But anyway, the point being that kneecaps definitely have more of a triangular quality. They're certainly not a circle. And the more straight lines you can use for constructing your characters and doing your drawings, absolutely the better. You can measure straight lines and it's very easy to turn a straight line into something that is more curved. But often if you start with curves, people tend to over curve and they tend to make everything much, much too rounded and the shapes tend to get lost, and particularly the structure tends to get lost. Now, in terms of hands and feet very much kind of triangular, and hands can either be rectangular or diamond shape. And we'll get into that in a minute. But just having a look at the basics there, you can see those feet very much triangular shape, whether seen from the front or the side, feet tend to be triangular. And then once we've sort of put all of these elements in, so thinking about head, rib cage, and hips, then directions for arms and legs, we can start to fill in the muscle shapes over that skeleton. And the muscle shapes are much more kind of oval and circle shapes. And it's okay at that point to start working on your ovals and circles because you have the underlying construction. You have those straight angled straight lines. So if we go back to looking at having a look here at Luffy again, you can see in terms of the muscle shapes or some of the broader shapes, he's not super muscly, but you can see there's a rounding off to that shoulder, but that's still following the overall angle of the body. Even if we go back here all the way to Goku. So even though he's very muscly on this middle image here, there's still a sense that these muscle shapes, these ovals and circles, are on a straight line. They're on a more of an angular kind of skeleton, if you like. But these curves, circles for the shoulder, and muscle shapes, all of those can be built on top. And so once we're at the point where we've got all of those muscle shapes in the right kind of place, in the right kind of size, then we can look at putting on the clothing and putting on the outline. Now, at that juncture, that's when you want to be kind of erasing, removing some of the excess lines and starting to refine the character. So that's where that kneadable eraser can become really helpful, or using multiple layers if you're doing a digital image. So here's an example. This is one that we did last week. So using a photographic reference and then using the same kind of construction. So thinking about the shape of the head, rib cage, and hips, you can see underlying in her. And then looking for those muscle shapes on top and building it up. We've got triangles on the knees, diamond shapes on the hands, and triangles on the feet. And then eventually our finished anime character, so doing that line work over the top. Now you'll notice that I've changed the size of her head. So rather than having an adult proportion, which is that there's around about 8 head lengths across the whole of the body, 7 to 8 head lengths is adult size. With children, and also typically with anime characters, because often they are children or they might be teenagers, you find that the head proportion is much bigger compared to the rest of the body. So her head proportion, as I say, should be between, if we took that and went sort of through a body 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-ish. Looking at our anime character, so we're making her younger. We've now got 1 head size there, and so there's probably 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 head lengths. So by making the head bigger, we've made her look younger. Is someone putting their hand up or just stretching? Okay, wasn't sure. All right. So we're going to come and do an example drawing now. I'm just going to stop sharing that for a second. And bring up our example drawing. And for this, so I mentioned as well, you can be doing your own examples if you like, so you don't have to follow the same examples that I'm doing. If you've got a specific character that you would prefer to be drawing as your example drawing now, you can be looking at that. Oh, I'm not sharing, sorry. Oh, wait. There you go. So we haven't done this one before in any of the classes. This is what we're going to do today. We're going to do Goku. But as I say, if you've got a specific character you would prefer to be drawing, by all means, you can do that character. The only thing that I would say is you'll be using the same kind of step-by-step methodology. So I'm just going to bring that over. This is what we did last lesson. If anyone does have a character that they are going to do instead, absolutely fine. But if you want me to have a look at your character, do just let me know what character it is that you're going to do. And you can either do that in the chat or by emailing me your character design. I'll just pop my email in the chat again one more time, because I think there's a few people who have just arrived. Okay, so that's my email address in the chat again. So I mentioned before about I'm using Photoshop. Is anyone using digital tools, or is everyone going to be drawing just with paper and pencil? No, I'm just going to assume that that silence means paper and pencil largely. If you do decide you want to start drawing with digital tools, the one thing I would say, especially if you want to take it quite seriously, you either want to have some kind of tablet with a drawing stylus, like a drawing pen that you can use, or a drawing tablet. So obviously the very expensive drawing technology, it's like a tablet except it's a screen, and so you're drawing directly on the screen, but they're very expensive. So you're probably more likely to have a tablet you can use a stylus with or something like that. Whether you're using Photoshop or whether you're using any other kind of program, one tip I would give you is use layers. So if you have a look down here on the right hand side and bottom right hand side of your screen, you can see there's heaps and heaps of layers that I'm using. And the reason for that is the layers work like a sketch. So I've got a layer here that is essentially dyed blue, and it means that I can do a sketch on that layer. And then if I'm drawing over the top of it and I want to erase my drawing, it doesn't erase the layer underneath. So my sketch remains in place. And I can also reduce the opacity of my sketch so I can make it lighter and more faint, or I can just erase on the sketch layer. It just makes the whole process a lot easier. Someone did ask me what I prefer, whether I think it's better to be drawing digitally or drawing traditionally. I think drawing traditionally teaches you a lot. So I do think that drawing traditionally is a great idea, especially when you're starting out. But digital tools are also fantastic. They're very useful. Okay, so to get us started, let's just have one more look at that layering up. So the first thing we're going to do, head, rib cage, and hips, then arms, legs, knees, hands, and feet. And we're looking for just directions and framework. Then we're going to build up muscle shapes, and then build up to the outline of the character. That's a rough outline, and we can use that to then make the more refined outline until we've essentially got our finished character. So starting out with this one, there it is. We want to start out in the same kind of way. So starting off with shoulders. He's got very wide shoulders, so we're going all the way across from shoulder to shoulder. And the angle coming down through the body here, rib cage. Rib cage is an egg kind of shape, and hips. Now, his head, normally we'd be looking for neck, but because he's sort of ducking down a little bit, you can see his shoulders are quite high. And so the position of his head is a little bit lower than we might expect. We've got that round shape of the head, and then the jaw coming in a little bit lower. Yes, whatever reference you want to use, absolutely fine. I really don't mind. I really understand if Dragon Ball's not your favorite, that's absolutely fine, whatever reference. This is more just following the same step by step. So whatever reference you're using, I want you to look for the shoulders, the width and the angle across the shoulders, and then the line through the body, the rib cage. You can see his rib cage in here, and the hips. Then we want from shoulder to elbow, that's going to be the first angle for the arm. And now he's got one hand that's kind of coming towards us. So we'll have still the triangular elbow, but then the actual arm coming towards us is now very short. And then rectangular hand. These shapes aren't precise, so I'm not trying to get exactly the right shape to start with. I'm just trying to get the position of things. Same up in the upper body, we want one angle going from shoulder to elbow, and then triangle in that elbow, and then elbow to wrist. And this time, this is where I would say we're looking at a diamond kind of hand. Let me make that a bit bigger, because we've got the angle to the fingers there, to that knuckle, and then down to the wrist. Overall, we've got a kind of a diamond type shape. So from the wrist to the knuckles to the fingers, overall diamond kind of shape on that hand. Now he's going to have big hair. So just a rough idea of where that hair is going to go. And then legs, one angle coming out from the hip to the knee, and the knee to the foot. Now, someone was asking whether the feet are, is it okay if the feet aren't triangles? Most of the time, if it's a human character, the feet will be triangular, at least a little bit. Is it a specific character, Cormac, that you're looking at that doesn't have triangular feet? Because if you can send me an image of the character that you're looking at, I'd be happy to have a look. But even here, I can see there's very much sort of a triangle on that foot. It can be a bit longer though. So knee's going to be about there, and then triangle foot sort of there. It's Kakashi again, but in a different pose. I mean, being one of those like shoujin kind of characters, I would expect to see he's got fairly triangular feet as well. Yeah. Let me show you. His feet are in a different position. Yeah, no, I understand, but like, here's an example. So this is the character you're looking at. Helps if it's not in that layer. So in this image, for example, is it a bit like this? Because the triangles aren't necessarily always, it's the exact image you're looking at, great. Yeah, so the triangles isn't just about when they're like side-on triangles, it's also like this foot here, it is a triangle, but it's a triangle in that kind of way. So it's like a triangle there. And then this one is a triangle in that kind of way. So they're not just triangles. The triangular shape does vary a little bit, but as your basic shape, I'd still be using a triangle for that shape. Certainly more of a triangle than a circle. With this one, though, I guess arguably you could say maybe it's a bit more rectangular as well. But do you see the way that it does kind of taper up into the ankle? So that's why I would say overall it still has a triangular kind of shape to it. Cool image, by the way. If I do another one of these, I might use that one as my image. It's cool. All right. So we've got our stick figure pretty much laid in now, or at least I do. And we can start to put a sense of where, say, the facial features are, I think is our next step. So look for the bottom of his eyes. So from the bottom of his eyes all the way down to his chin. The proportion from the top of the head to the bottom of the chin on anime characters, the eyes tend to be more than halfway down. And although he's meant to be a little bit older here, so he doesn't quite have the same child proportions as some other characters might, there is still a sense that his eyes are pretty low down his face, and they're very much triangular kind of eyes. And now they come together with that very aggressive, angry crease between the eyes. You've got a sense of his nose, which is almost just like a kind of L shape. He's got a very small little angry mouth, which is actually so high, it's pretty much touching the underside of his nose. So I can bring that up. This is all still on our kind of sketch layer. Now with some facial proportions, the eyes are usually one eye width apart. So even though he's scowling, where the inside of his eyes is, where that stops, is about the same width as from the inside to the outside of the eye. And you can see the way he's got this very angular shape on the outside of the eye. I was saying before about how much or how little you show in terms of details on things like eyes and nose and mouth. And out of those three, eyes and nose and mouth, generally you'd have, if there's going to be any kind of detailing, it's probably in the eyes more so than the other two. But sometimes you do have slightly more sort of realistic interpretations of eyes and mouth, mouth and nose. Usually they're pretty small and not very well defined. His ear is going to be over here. And so while we're carrying on with this, we can also start to put some muscle shapes on. So he's a very big muscular character. So let's start with shoulder muscles, we're looking at rounded, this is called the deltoid muscle on the shoulder. So rounded deltoid muscle. And then ovals in the bicep and tricep. So those are in the upper arm. Now he's got all sorts of extra little angular bits there as well, but the overall shape is what we're just looking at this stage. Down here, we've got the angle, that triangular part of the elbow, and then there's just sort of a slightly rounded muscle for the forearm. And on the other side, we can see more of that forearm. And what you find with the forearm, and this also applies to the calf, which we can't see here, but with the forearm, there's a rounded big muscle, which is close to the joint. So it's close to the elbow. And then as it comes up to the wrist, it gets much more narrow, much more thin. So you can see that very clearly here on his arm. But the same is true for the calf muscle. So if we look at, for example, this one that I showed you before, we've got the rounded shape here. Oops. So we've got rounded muscle up here in the calf, and then it gets very thin as it goes down towards the ankle. It's not all one big rounded shape for the calf muscle. All right, so even though we can't see his legs, because we're going to put some material over the top of those, we want thigh muscle. So rounded thigh muscle, big oval as it comes to the knee. And then as I mentioned, calf is going to be rounded close to the knee and then becoming thinner as it gets closer to the ankle. So rounded closer to the knee and then thinner and flatter as it gets closer to the ankle. Now, this is true for just general human proportions, but anime, unless it's a, kind of supernatural creature or someone like Luffy from One Piece who can actually change the size and shape of his body at will, generally they are going to follow normal kind of basic human proportions. So if you're unsure about things like how big or small the head should be, you can use the example I gave before about a grown adult is going to be about 8 head lengths. So from the top of the head to the bottom of the head, there'll be about 8 of those would fit into the whole body. But another good example is the length of the foot. So a lot of people struggle with how long or short a foot should be, and often they're too small when people are drawing them. So the length of the foot from front to back is actually the same as the length of your forearm. And so this is true for all of you as well. Whether or not you want to actually try it out right now, I don't know. But if you take your foot and you put it from your elbow, the inside of your elbow, you'll see your toes stop at your wrist. And that is true for everybody, or just about. And it's certainly going to still be true for anime characters as well, unless there's a reason for it, unless someone specifically made a decision that they want to have the character have very small feet or very large feet. All right. So how are we all going at the moment? Are we all doing pretty well? Excellent. I just got a message from Ruby and Jude saying, doing good. A thumbs up from Lily. Lovely. Is everybody at the same point as me now? Just about. Anais is saying, I think I made mine too small. Yeah, it can happen. And I will say it's certainly the bigger you work, I think the easier it is to kind of then get into details. So generally I would say try and be, yeah, it's hard to put in details exactly. So I would generally say try and start bigger rather than starting smaller. I don't think do it, like if you want to do it again, I would do it again maybe later on rather than sort of starting again now. I think let's just keep going with what you've got and try and do as much as you can. And remember the step by step so that you could do it, repeat it for yourself again later. We are going to do another character, so don't feel like this is your only drawing that you're going to do today. And so that'll give you another opportunity to sort of work a bit bigger and work on more details. Okay. So now that I'm at this stage, what I want to do is get rid of some of the sketchiness. So I'm reducing the opacity of my work down. So this would be, if you've got a kneadable eraser, this will be erasing some of your original sketches so that it's nice and light. And when you're working over the top of it, you can be a lot darker. Oh, I just saw there was an email saying, is this a good reference, from Natalie? Yes, that is a fine reference. I hope you already started working. Sorry, I didn't see your email earlier. All right, so I've reduced my sketch by quite a lot. One thing I will do that's still just on this sketch layer though is a little bit of the clothing, so a sense of where the clothing is going to go. He's got sort of the open V shirt there, and we can see his neck, very muscly kind of neck coming in across there. His wristband, and then shirt. And so with fabric, any kind of fabric, any kind of clothing, my tip on that would be keep it angular. So look at all the straight angles and the sharp kind of changes of directions. Fabric tends to have these sharp angles. It tends not to be rounded pretty much at all. So whenever you're looking at fabric or you're trying to draw fabric or draw your designs, just pay attention to how many kind of straight lines and straight angles there are. A little bit more, and it's also adding a bit of bulk. So you can see it's adding, especially around like those kneecaps, it's adding a bit more bulk to the character. Got nice simple shoes, which is good. Shoes are often a bit challenging to come up with a good shoe design. And I'm just going to zoom in as well on his face and put in where I'm going to put his pupils. Looks about right. Bring him a little bit closer. Okay. So now that I'm ready to start inking, and the inking is going to be going over with darker, more singular kind of lines. I'm going to get in a little bit closer. And I'm going to start with the face because the face is quite important, but notice as well, his hair is covering quite a lot of his face. So let's start with some of the outline of the hair. Now with hair, you really want to group it together. So he's got a few kind of individual hairs that are coming out from the larger mass, but essentially he's got these just big spikes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 big spikes of hair. And I think it's one of those things that until it's sort of pointed out to you that the hair is all grouped together like this, it's easy to think that there's a lot more detail going on than there actually is. So rather than trying to draw each individual hair in a certain clump, you're better off clumping a lot of the hair together. So kind of keeping it grouped together and then making some small changes just at the edges of the outline, or in this case, a couple of little flicks of individual hairs in between the bigger groups. And then we've got 1, 2, 3 different tones. So there's the outline, then there's the really dark area of the hair, mid-tone for the hair, and a light area for the hair. And that's how they're giving it depth. So if you're sketching with your pencil, we can do this just as a line art. So not putting any kind of tone in there, which is what I'm going to do. But if you want to put in some tone, then do a second outline that's going to be the shadow area. So that's this kind of shadow area. Going all there. And color all of this in, obviously not with white, but coloring that whole dark area in so that it gets at least 2 tones, but preferably 3 tones. Now I'm rotating my picture, I'm rotating the canvas so that it's easier for me to get the angle across the face. I think in general, people have a direction that's easiest for them to move their pencil. And mine is like from the bottom right, sorry, from the bottom left to the top right. And so whenever I'm doing something and I want to kind of get that mark right the first time, and this is whether I'm doing it digitally or whether I'm doing it traditionally, I'll move my paper around so that I get the best angle to be able to do a single kind of mark and a single line. So don't feel like you have to just leave your paper in one position. You can always move it around. It's got very angular face. To make that face too rounded, he's going to look a bit too cute, which as an adult here, he is not. He's meant to be quite tough. So I need to keep those angles nice and sharp. And then the bottom of the chin usually is a little bit squared off. You can see there. So it's a little bit flat at the bottom of the chin. Then eyes. So first big eyebrows. Because those big eyebrows are actually defining quite a lot of the shape of the eye. And then his eyes, he's pretty much just got pupil and iris kind of combined. And then that bottom eyelid coming up quite high to make him look like he's squinting. Trim his face in a little bit. I think I've gone a little bit too wide. That's better. Now he's got the second line underneath his eyes as well, which is giving him even more of a squinty kind of look. Then, as we mentioned, nose shape. Nose shape is kind of like three sides of a diamond. And then he's got a little shadow that goes on one side. Oops. Mouth coming up quite close, really touching that nose. It might be a little bit too high. Let's go there. You notice it's not even as well. The mouth has a slightly crooked kind of shape, which adds to a scowl. And in terms of thinking about how to design your mouth, it's very important to think about what the shape of the mouth is going to do to the expression. So right now we've got this very angry, aggressive look, and the eyes are telling a big part of that story. But if I was to take the mouth out and give him a smile, his eyes are still going to look angry, but it certainly changes his expression quite a lot. And it makes him look like he's going, yeah. If he was just smiling a little bit, that would be saying something different about his mood. But as is, he looked pretty sadistic with that smile. Yeah, absolutely. And that's sort of the point. It's interesting how there is, even just with a simple line change, we end up with a very different mood for that character. All right. And so the rest of this inking is going to be about putting in these details. It's got a fairly exaggerated kind of collarbone here. We've got shirt. Coming down further. 3-layer shirt. And there's just a lot, they've gone with a lot of angles and angles and angles to kind of describe these overlapping shapes on the shirt. And the main thing I would say about that, just again to reiterate that, is make sure that you use straight lines. Straight lines for clothing, really important. Straight lines in sort of faces a lot of the time too, but particularly in clothing. The way that clothing folds, it tends to be more straight lines. All right. Now I'm going to have a go at the hands. And I did mention before with hands thinking about the diamond shape, or it's not even that it's always a diamond or always a rectangle, but I would say look for it. So if you can find a diamond shape or you can find a rectangular shape, and that's going to be all of the shape of the hand. So it's not thinking about the fingers as individual fingers. It's thinking about the whole shape of the hand. So I've said overall, I think that this is sort of a diamond kind of shape, and I'm standing firm by that. It does need to be moved up a little bit though. So it's a little bit higher. The fingers are coming up here. And then the wrist is a bit more there. So I'm just changing that sketch. But if we have a look, so once you've got the overall shape of the hand, pull the fingers out of that shape. So don't try and draw the fingers by themselves. I think that's a mistake a lot of people do, especially when they're starting out. They sort of go, okay, well, I'll draw the fingers. So I'll draw this finger, and then there's this finger, and then these two fingers, and then there's the thumb. And suddenly the hand gets really out of control. And also the fingers are too rounded. So once we've got this bigger kind of sense of the overall shape of the hand, then we can break it down into, okay, so there's these angles across the top two fingers. And then these two fingers close together, and this one's tucked under. And the knuckles, look at how square those knuckles are. And then the thumb's touching that finger. And just have a look at how I'm using these straight lines to get the shape of the hand. So it's a lot of straight angular lines. And then the wristband. And I mentioned on the arms, we've got wider towards the elbow. So closer it is toward the elbow, the wider it is. And the elbow has a little point to it. His shirt coming up over his shoulder there. Well, he's got two shirts on. Second shirt there. And then I don't know what's going on with these shoulder muscles. There's too many muscles here as far as I can tell. But let's just put them in. Extra muscles. Very muscly. Then on this side, we've got that first sleeve, second sleeve, and muscle shapes. So they are slightly rounded, but just notice the way that there is also still straight lines. And then I mentioned this arm being foreshortened. So in the sense that we're not seeing the full length of that forearm. So I'm just putting in the round part of the forearm as it connects to the elbow. And then put that fist on top of it. And with the fist, this time I said I think it's more rectangular, but it's the same principle as I said with the other hand, which is start with the big shape. So we can see the outline of the knuckles. And that's thumb there. And then draw the fingers out of that shape. So don't try and draw the individual fingers by themselves. So we've got one finger there. This one here. You can see a little bit of wristband there as well. So far, Goku's looking pretty good. Little belt. Many lines in the little belt. And into the pants. Again, lots of straight lines is what we're looking at. Anytime you see folds or creases, they're going to be pretty much straight lines, but just pay attention to the angles of them. Zoom out a bit so I can see properly. Now, as it comes around to the leg, you notice that the folds stop being completely straight lines and they start to sort of come around and in front. So that's quite important. It shows the material folding in a slightly different kind of way. And I know I'm talking about material and clothing quite a lot, but it's one of those things that I think sometimes we don't focus enough on. We tend to think about bodies, characters, and we sort of think about their bodies and the anatomy and the structure. And that is really important. But it's also really important to remember that most of the time, you're probably not going to be drawing naked characters. All right. Maybe you will, I'm not sure. But most of the time, you're probably not. Most of the time, your characters are probably going to have clothes on. And so consequently, you need to have a sense of how to draw clothing. It's one thing to sort of say you can do a beautiful anime face and you're starting to get a sense of how to do a pose. But as I say, you need to have a good idea of how to draw clothing too. And I would say the big key to that is definitely straight lines and looking for the way that things overlap. Now I'm just going to move everything over because the drawing is running a little bit across. There we go. A little bit further out. And pay attention as well to, with folds, what's the furthest thing out with a fold? So folds kind of have this way of wrapping around each other as well. So you see this one's sticking out further than this one. And then underneath, they keep sort of sticking out a little bit further before they wrap around. If you don't quite get that right, it's going to make the drawing look a little bit weird. So, or it might not even make it look weird. It might just change the width of something. So there you see I changed this one so that it's coming in higher and it makes his leg more skinny. Whereas if I bring it back further out, it makes his leg wider. And then got the shoe here. Notice the way the shoe is slightly overlapping. Slightly overlapping the rope there. All right. We have a line drawing of Goku. Excellent. So where is everybody else at? Have you finished your drawing? Close to finishing? We've been drawing pretty much non-stop for just over an hour. Oh, Natalie's saying she's finished. So if you want to send me what your drawing looks like, happy to have a look. All right, a few people saying they're finished. Excellent. Okay, what we're going to do next, so I'll give a couple of minutes for the people who haven't quite finished to finish. What we're going to do next is we're going to take an example of a photograph and we're going to turn it into an anime. So that's what I showed you with the girl on the broomstick. It's going to be that kind of thing. So for those of you who have finished, I want you to, you can either use the same reference that I'm going to use, and I'll show you what that looks like now, or if you've got a picture you would prefer to use, and it could be of you, or it could be someone you know, or whatever you like, you can use that instead. So maybe take a couple of minutes to find a photograph that you do want to use. Now I am saying photograph, not character. So I don't want you to pick an existing anime character. I want you to have a photograph. So for example, something like this, turning her into an anime character, or like this guy, or an action character. So something where there's someone in a clear pose, and we're going to turn them into an anime character. I think this is the one that I'm going to do today. She's quite cute. Also, if you want to get a drink of water or something, now's probably a good time. Okay. I'm going to assume that we're all finished, or at least close to finish, and also that you've all picked a character to work on, whether it's the same one that I'm working on here or whether it's a different one. Entirely up to you. So we just did an actiony kind of character. So I'm going to swap over to different gender, but also a different kind of pose, a different kind of mood as well, if you like. Now, before we carry on, so especially if you're still looking, I do just want to reiterate about facial proportions. So how best to get those facial proportions. So if we come back to what we were looking at this morning, these are the general sort of facial proportions for a female character. And these are the general proportions for a male character. And any kind of non-binary or any other kind of character that you might have could be something in between those two or some variation on those. But this is what we would generally classify as a masculine type character and a feminine type character. Now, for both of these, if we go to where are we? If we go back to my, oh, did I close it? Sorry, everybody. Yeah, accidentally closed my slideshow. So we'll just go back here for a second. In terms of normal facial proportions, common, like adult facial proportions, I mentioned before, we've got the eyes in the middle of the face. So the eyes actually line up to the middle of the face. But on anime proportions, the eyes are below the middle of the face. With both, there is an eye width between the eyes. So there's the space of one eye between the eyes, but anime eyes are going to be bigger. Sorry, just sort of question from Natalie. What if you're doing yourself? Oh, I see. No, in that case, that's sort of why I'm bringing this up, because I want you to stylize yourself based on what is common anime proportions. So you'll be exaggerating certain things. So one of the first things to be exaggerating is the size of the eyes, making sure that your eyes are much bigger than on a fully grown adult. Now, I don't think any of you in this class are fully grown adults, so your eyes are actually going to be a bit bigger compared to the rest of your face than me, for example, who is a fully grown adult. But even so, you still want to exaggerate a little bit more, because the anime facial proportions are more similar to a toddler. And even a toddler's eyes are probably not quite as big as anime eyes, but it's more similar to sort of a baby or a toddler proportions. And that's part of the reason why anime characters look cute, is because they look, essentially, they've got the same proportions as children or babies. Even when you've got a more grown-up masculine style character, the eyes are still a little bit bigger and they are still lower down on the face. And the reason the eyes are lower down on the face, if you have a look at the child, is because the jaw is smaller. So it's not that the skull is bigger. It's not that like the top half of your head is bigger. It's actually that the bottom half of your head is smaller compared to on an adult. So as you get older, your jaw continues to get bigger. This is just a fact of life. So when you're a kid, your jaw is really small. That's why you have less teeth when you're a kid. You know, your first set of teeth that come in, you have less of those than you do when you become an adult. And you lose those teeth because your jaw is getting bigger, and then your jaw makes room and it has the capacity to have more teeth. But anyway, the point being, anime jaws, much smaller to make the characters look younger and to look cuter. We also want to have less nose and mouth. Oh, okay. Sorry, I just saw another message. So from Kiahi, sorry, I thought, yeah, I did think I didn't have a Natalie enrolled in the class as your mom's name. All good. And then Ruby and Jude asking, can I add things onto my anime self? Of course, absolutely. So anything you want to add, by all means, definitely add. This is just giving you a sort of a brief overview of facial proportions. And how to make it more anime. I would say the main thing, the really big thing that I just do want to emphasize would be make sure that you have enough room so that you have more up here than you do down here. So I think particularly last week, there was quite a lot of people who didn't have enough up here. They didn't have enough forehead. And so consequently, the bottom half of the face looked too long. And so to get that anime kind of look, you definitely want to have this part of the face, the lower part of the face, be smaller and be kind of more compressed. Okay. So I'm hoping everybody has chosen a picture that you would like to work on. And this is the picture that I am going to work on. So we're all going to start in the same way, which is thinking about, first off, the general proportions, which we've discussed a few times already. So the general proportions, the first thing we need to do is shoulders. Turn the opacity down on that a little bit. And rib cage. Now she's kind of leaning back. So she's not in a perfectly straight line. Her spine's not in a straight line. She's got overall a sort of a lean, which is giving her that kind of casual look. And then triangle hips. And we can get legs. So one leg to the knee and then to the foot. Other leg coming out to the knee and then down to the foot. If you just want to do a face, you can. That's fine. Was that Ruby or Jude asking, can I just do a face? Okay. Yep, no problems. So angle from elbow down to wrist. And then look at that hand. That is a diamond shaped hand. On the other side, shoulder to elbow. It's not super clear. It's tucked in here somewhere. And then elbow to wrist. And that hand, again, it's going to be a diamond kind of shape, but it's behind a book this time. It's still kind of diamond shape. Now, I haven't put the head on yet, and I put the head on last, which is what I did for the previous one as well. And the reason I'm putting the head on last is because of what we were talking about a while ago with thinking about, do you want to make the character look older or younger or sort of cuter or whatever? If you put the head on last, you can kind of decide based on the rest of the body whether you want to change the side of the head or keep it the same. So if I pretty much keep the size of the head the same, then she's going to look like a normal girl, I guess. It's normal sort of early 20s proportions. If I want to make her a bit more anime-ish, maybe even a little bit younger, then I want to make that head a bit bigger. So drawing the head, start off with a circle and then put the jaw on the circle. And the jaw has 4 angles to it. There's an angle to the corner of the jaw, and then an angle in towards the chin, and that's on both sides. So angle to the corner of the jaw, angle into the chin. So now we've got a character who's going to be younger because proportionately the head is bigger. I want to put a line down the middle of the face so we know what angle her face is on. She's not quite square onto us. She's turned a little bit to the side. So I'm putting that line off to one side. And then with the eyes, remembering that they should be, the top of the eyes should be halfway down the head. Zoom in a little bit. Nose and mouth. So we go back to this one, have a look at these proportions again. Get rid of him. From the top of the head to the nose is 1/2 and 1/4, so 3/4. And then between the nose and the chin, the mouth is slightly higher than halfway between the nose and the chin. So don't make the mouth too low on the face. The eyes should be 1 eye distance apart. Eyebrows. Get an idea of where her hair is going to go. I'm taking her hat off. And instead of a hat, I'm going to give a little cat ears because I think that'll be quite cute. Now, before we go too much further on the face, give her some muscle shapes. Now, unlike with Goku, she's meant to be a youngish kind of cute girl, in my imagination anyway. So she's not going to be as muscly. So these muscle shapes that we're putting around aren't going to be as big and rounded. I want to make them longer and more slim. But there is still on that upper arm still a sense of there's a shoulder and then the upper arm muscle. And then on the wrist, we've got the muscle is bigger, closer to the elbow. That's still true. And it gets thinner as it goes closer to the wrist. I'm just putting in a bit of the book there as well. And like I said, she's slightly leaning back, so everything is slightly tilted forwards down towards the left. And muscle on the upper leg, muscle on the calf, round close to the knee, and then gets thinner. She's got high top kind of shoes. Remember what I said about feet as well? The length of the foot is the same as the length of the forearm. Handy one to remember. And then one leg here. Muscle rounded closer to the knee and getting thinner as it goes towards the ankle. It's still triangular. So now is a good time to check whether you're happy with all of your proportions. Is there anything you want to change? Is there anything you're going to add? Like I said, I'm going to add a pair of little cat ears, and I might add some big glasses as well, round glasses to make it look more cool. Now there's all of the books that are beside her. I don't think we'll get into all of those details, but we can get a sense of there being some of those around her. So how's everyone doing with their sketches? Does anyone want to show me their sketch? If you're doing the same thing, or if you're not doing the same thing, you can also email it to me if you prefer. Oh, was someone showing me their work? I missed it. Oh, nice. Yeah, looking good. Okay, is everyone up to this stage? We've all got a sketched in. We've got a character sketched in. All right. So now let's make the features a little bit more clear. And because we're working from a photograph for this one, once you're at a certain point, like once you've got your character kind of sketched in and everything's in the right kind of place, you don't have to worry as much about looking at the reference. You can kind of just fill in any gaps because you're now designing your character. I am just going to adjust my character. I want to move her upper body down a little bit. She's looking a bit too long. So I'm going to make that a lot lighter. And zooming in. So first off, I'm going to define where her eyes are going to be. Remembering their position should be more than halfway down the head. Nose 3/4. And mouth closer to the nose than the chin. If we give her just a flat cheek, nothing wrong with that. If we want to make her look even a little bit younger or cuter, you can also give her a slightly more rounded cheek before you come into the chin. And that just softens the face a little bit. Giving a kind of a laid back, relaxed look. Maybe raise one of her eyebrows. And always drawing faces and eyes. Make sure you draw one part at a time. So don't just finish one eye beautifully and then move on to the next eye, because getting them to match is a really hard part. And a lot of people really struggle with that. So whenever I'm drawing eyes, I start off by drawing the overall shape. And then I make sure that they're both the right size and the right shape. And then I make sure that they match each other. And so I'll do a little bit of one, then a little bit of the other, then a little bit of one, then a little bit of the other. I'm going to bring her hair down a little bit long. And her neck. And then, as I said, I want to give her little cat ears. Now, for her clothing, the original girl is just wearing a pretty relaxed kind of clothing, t-shirt, a pair of pants. I think that's fine. I think my character is going to have similar kind of thing. So, t-shirt. I quite like the little skull and crossbones that she had on her t-shirt. And like I said, with the arms, there's not going to be much in the way of muscles for her arms because she's thinner. But let's have a look at the hands. A little bit shorter on the hands. But first, that diamond shape. And then bring the fingers out of that shape rather than trying to draw the individual fingers first. Make your hair a little bit longer. And then pants. Got long shorts on. This isn't my final drawing yet. I'm just trying to make sure that everything looks right. Everything's going to be in the right kind of place. They come in there. and shoes. So that's the design for my girl. Slightly melancholy cat girl. I'm going to change her shoulder a little bit, bring her shoulder up so that she's leaning into those books a bit more. And let's not forget that she's sitting on a stool, because otherwise she's going to be hovering weirdly. How's everyone doing with this sketch part of their sketch? Looking good? I'm seeing a few nods and then a few shrugs. Very good. Okay, 2 very goods in the chat. Excellent. All right, I'm going to make this sketch lighter again. So you notice the way I was saying before about layering things up, and as much as you might not be using digital layers to do it, it's still layering up in the sense of doing a sketch and building on that sketch and building on that sketch. So even if you're not doing it digitally, I would expect to kind of see various layers, you know, and it becoming more refined with each layer that you do. So if I take away some of the sketching now, this is where we're at. So that's a different kind of thing to our first layer, but she's getting more refined and more like an anime character. So let's get stuck in with the final layers. So starting with the face again, zoom in a little bit more. So the eyes, as mentioned last class as well, there's lots and lots of different ways to do eyes. And the eyes will say something about your character. So think about what kind of eyes you want to put on your character. But still do one side, do the top eyelid for one side, and then come across and do the top eyelid for the other side to make sure that they match. Now you notice with this character, because she's not quite front on, she's a little bit 3/4, one eye is going to be wider than the other. If you have a look at the reference, see one eye, this eye is a little bit wider than the other eye. And that's because she's not facing us completely front on. So putting in the pupil. Always spend a bit of time getting the shape of the pupil right and the position of the pupil right. And then if she's got an iris, we want to put in the iris shape. And putting in a little bit of the bottom eyelid, coming up from the corner of the eye as well. Put a couple of lashes on the bottom eyelid. And so because I did a bit of one side and then a bit of the other, and then a bit of one side and then a bit of the other, her eyes match. I want to keep working on her eyes. I want to finish off the eyes. So I'm going to put a bit of tone in for the iris. So this is, I was using a pencil, I'd just be sketching lightly to make her irises kind of mid-gray. And then making them a semicircle a little bit darker than that. So with all the sketching underneath, it might not be super clear what I'm doing here. So we'll take the sketch off in just a second so you can see. That's her eyes at the moment. And so the darker bit, this semicircle up the top, is like the shadow being cast by her eyelids. And then we want to put in a highlight. So it's going to be a light patch. We can have one highlight, and we can have another highlight on the opposite side of the eye, and so at a diagonal. And that's going to be her eyes. Then I've got glasses. Doing a circle on these is tough. One was pretty good. The other one has gone very wonky. And we need the glasses on the other side too. Now, eyebrows. Eyebrows are going to change her expression. She's looking a little bit melancholy at this stage. We can make her look more happy. We wanted by making her eyebrows flatter. Oh, we could make her look like she's wondering what's going on by making one eyebrow go up. So it looks like she's raising one eyebrow. Looks a little bit worried at the moment, a little bit melancholy. So move this around. Nose and mouth. The mouth is going to do a lot for her expression. So at the moment, that original mouth that I put in gives her a slightly kind of melancholy look. We want to make her look like she's kind of half smiling. Can lift one side of her cheek, or we could lift both. Make her definitely look like she's smiling. Or we could really make it look like she's smiling. So what you decide to do with the mouth is entirely up to you. And if you're working with a different reference, you might base it on the reference that you have, or you might not. You might decide you want to change it. That's where we're at the moment. Put in the side of her face. Now, I can't remember if I said this last time or this time, but anime hair can often overlap or go in front of eyebrows and eyes, and you can still kind of see the eyebrows and eyes through the hair. I'm not sure why, it's just one of those funny quirks of anime. It's almost like the hair's slightly invisible. Right. Fluffy cat ears. Okay. Keep bringing her hair down. So this is where she's at the moment. We take away the sketch lines. You're looking like that. Pretty cute. How's everyone else doing? I can see most people look like you're still sketching. So, I can see a so hand gesture. Who's holding that up? That looks very cute. Like the way she's saying, hey. I think at this stage, if you're at the point where you kind of finished everything, Lily, either can work on another character or tidy the lines up would be the other suggestion I'd make. So try and reduce some of the sketchiness maybe, because that's another thing with anime drawing. It does have a pretty clean, kind of crisp look to the line work as well. Let's have a look at her hand. So hand, going down to wrist, and bring the fingers out of that shape. I already had that sketch of the hand there. So that's helped me define where the hand should go. And the arm gets bigger near the forearm. Still got shirt detail we haven't done yet. I'm putting a design on her t-shirt. And pants, creases and folds in pants. 1, 2, 3, at least 3 around a leg, around the crease of a knee. And then notice the way that the fold of her pants comes out further than her leg. So that angle comes out further than the angle of her leg. Shoes, high tops. Obviously, a lot more detail you could go into in shoes. But we won't go into heaps of detail at this stage. 1, 2 little creases. Actually, the angle on her leg is right, so it's coming out at the right angle. Make sure we're going to have a stool for her to be sitting on. All right, pretty close to done for me. Put books behind her for her to be leaning on. If we had more time, we'd go into more detail for that. If I take away that sketch now, that's where we're at. We've got cute little cat anime girl reading a book. Now, I'd be very keen to see some people's work. You can obviously keep drawing. We've still got another half hour and don't want to rush you. I think last time there was a few people who said they felt like it moved a bit fast, so I don't want to rush you this time. But what I will do in maybe 5 or 10 minutes, once you've done a bit more sketching, is put a little bit of shading onto her. Talk a little bit about shading, because so far we've just done kind of line work drawings without any shading, and I do want to talk a little bit about shading, but specifically how anime shading looks. So if anyone wants to send me an email with your work, I've had a couple of people send me emails and I've replied. I didn't reply in the chat. I just gave feedback in an email. I'm very happy to do that because I know everyone can be a little bit self-conscious about everyone seeing your work. So I don't want to pressure you, but if you do want me to show everyone your work and bring it up on my screen and edit it for you, I'm also really happy to do that. Are there any questions as well? Is there any particulars or specifics you feel like I haven't covered that you're really interested in and you really want to know? Now's a good time to have a chat about anything like that. I'm going to put my layers back up, my sketch layers, so that you can see this sort of step by step. Let me get rid of the picture. Isabel just asked, would it be good to outline these in pen or fine liner? Yeah, if I was doing this traditionally, that's exactly what I would do. But the one thing I would say about that is make sure that you reduce the amount of pencil that you use before you use the fine liner. And the reason being that once you put the fine liner on there, if you've got too much pencil underneath and you try and remove some of the pencil, what can end up happening is that you end up smudging the ink because there's too much pencil underneath the fine liner. So Kia, you said I use Copic multi-liner. Yeah, so with that, do you sort of reduce the amount of pencil that you're using underneath to kind of make sure, you know? Yep. I briefly saw you holding it up in the chat and then it was gone. But yeah, anything you're going to use over the top of pencil, you just want to make sure that you've got as little pencil as possible so that it doesn't smudge if you try and erase any more pencil later. I can see there's a few people who have stopped drawing now. So let's talk a little bit about shading. Anime shading generally is very simple. So it still follows the principle of light is coming from one specific direction, and therefore certain parts are either in shadow or casting shadows, but it's usually really simplified. And so the shapes are really reduced and there's not a lot of detail. So let's say I want to add some shading to my character over here. I'll just do a bit around the face, around the face and the neck, and a little bit around the hair. I won't go and do the whole body, but the same principle will apply wherever you go. So we've already done a little bit of shading in the eye. We've got the top eyelid casting a shadow, and there's a highlight. And so the same thing would apply to the rest of the face, but it's going to be pretty flat. And you do get in modern kind of anime, or manga, I should say, more so than anime, you do sometimes get very softer edges, like it's a bit more realistic if you've got a shadow. But in the older sort of style, more traditional style, or the animated style, what you tend to have is every shadow has a hard edge to it. So what I mean by that, let me show you. Just pick a mid-tone here. If we were going to put some shadow on her face, for example, we might put some under her hair. And we might have her glasses casting a shadow. Might have a bit of shadow on the side of her face. So coming down this side of her face. We might have a little bit of shadow from her nose. And then we'd probably have her neck going into shadow. So this whole area, only here. And her hair on this side is going to cast a shadow as well. Her hair can be casting shadows on itself too. But what I was just saying, so every shadow has a hard edge to it, as opposed to shadows having a soft edge, which would be, so if we go blender, so this would be a soft edge shadow. Now a soft edge shadow might be a little bit more realistic on certain drawings, but it's not that kind of traditional classic anime look. Generally, with the anime look, you're going to have a much stronger, kind of harder edge to everything. And it's part of that simplification, everything being slightly simplified in anime. And so even the shadows the shadows are very simple. Now you notice the way paying attention to the shadows though is still really important in terms of the shape that you're putting in. So if down here on her neck, if I just put a straight line there, it looks okay. But if I make the line have more of a sense of it kind of dips down around her collar and then goes up over the shirt, like steps up over the shirt, see how that makes her, the collar of her shirt now look like it has shape and it also has depth. So making your shadow shapes, and this is not something that you need to, it's something that I know because I have experience. It's not something that you necessarily need to know off the top of your head, but it's something that you should really pay attention to when you're looking at any kind of reference. So if we go back to, where's the original reference? Here, whoops, she is absolutely covered in stuff now. Let's get rid of some of these. So looking back to our original reference, have a look at where the shadow shapes are. Now, as I said, in a realistic picture, you can see that the shadow edges are a little bit soft. They're a bit more blended. They're not as hard, but they're still very clear shapes. And they still tend to be describing something. So, you know, her hat here is casting a shadow on the top of her head. And there's a shadow that's going underneath her jaw. But if we're doing a more anime style, we'll be using those same sort of shadow shapes and shadow examples, but we're going to make them much harder edged. You'd also have her face would be casting a shadow onto her hair on the side here, a little bit, depending on the color of her hair. And see how that just gives her a bit more of a 3D look and also more of an anime kind of look as well. If you're doing this in color, all of the same rules apply. So in the sense of, if we were to, let's say, okay, turn this to a skin color to start off with. So that's giving her one kind of skin color, or shadow color. And we put lighter skin color. This is obviously a little bit rough. I'm not trying to be 100% accurate with it, but I just want to show you the sort of sense of it's two colors, but it's also two different tones. So the actual colors are based on the same colors, but the two tones are slightly different. And that's what's going to create those shadow shapes and that three-dimensional look. Now, I would love to see anybody's work. We've got 15 minutes or so left. Oh, I got a couple of emails. Excellent. Now, with the emails that people have sent through, would you be happy with me bringing some of these up on the screen, or would you like me to just talk about them, without showing them? So I got Kiahi sent me one and Ruby has sent me one. Okay, cool. Kiahi said I can show. Let's have a look. Oh, and Ruby said fine with showing as well. Great. All right, let me bring these up. I was just laughing at Ruby's. It's very funny. So we've got, this is Ruby's reference picture. Very fun reference picture to start with. And then, where is it? There it is. It's very good. I like it a lot. So good work on the hands and the pose, like the mouth. I think that's really fun. I think the only thing maybe is just what we were talking about just then, of you could, like, especially on the neck, you could, because you've already got sort of like two colors on here. So if we made maybe under the neck a little bit darker, even just by layering the markers up, I think it tends to do it. So if I were to go like, oops, take this color and just make it like a tiny bit darker. Might make that whole area ever so slightly darker. It'd be a tiny bit more 3D, but overall, love it. Very cool concept. Really fun and very well done, very well executed. And then Kiahi, this is your two, very good proportions as well. On this one, I really like that one. It seems like it's quite small. It's maybe the only thing, so it's hard to get the fine detail. So maybe for next time, work a little bit bigger so you can do a bit more detail. And then, yeah, I really like that one. I think that's really cool. And I like the fact that you've done a slightly different pose as well. So it's not just sort of straight up and down, directly facing you. The fact that the head's on a tilt and stuff, that's really cool. Good work. All right. If no one else wants to share their work, that is totally fine. What we will do for these last 10 minutes is just go over what we've already gone through today. So just so that it's top of mind for you. So let's start off with talking a little bit about how to start your characters off when you're drawing bodies and poses. Oops. Just get rid of this one. So when you're first starting off doing your character pose, and this is whether you're doing it out of your imagination or whether you're working from a reference, we want shoulders and rib cage attached to the shoulders, hips, which originally we marked in with a triangle. I'll just mark those back in. Then direction on the arms and legs. So that should be a straight line from shoulder to elbow and elbow to wrist. Hands, often diamond shape, sometimes rectangular, but often diamond shape. And the legs going from hip to knee and knee to ankle. Again, think about the straight line first. So think about that, the bone that's underneath. So I'm going to have a look at this one. It's a standing example. Shoulders, rib cage, hips, arms, straight lines with triangles, and knees, straight line with triangles. Feet, triangles. Then when we're putting on the muscle shapes, it depends on your character. You might have muscles, a character with bigger muscles like Goku we did earlier, or you might have a character that's a bit more slender. And the width of the shoulders is also important. and then the size of the head. So if it's a regular size head, so it's more realistic, or whether it's a bigger, exaggerated head is entirely up to you. And if you want to make a character a lot more towards like a chibi kind of character, then definitely we're looking for something that is very much a really big head and very tiny body with arms and legs that basically come to almost featureless stumps. And then you'd be having big eyes and a big mouth. So the level of exaggeration that you put into something as well really defines what style of anime that you're doing. Then once you've got on so that's your basic body structure and that's all done, then we start to build up those muscle shapes and put clothes on. And so the outline and the clothing is the next sort of level to refine. So we come back to our cat girl. Where's my cat girl drawing? So second layer of cat girl. She's more refined. She's got her clothes, still a bit sketchy. And then once you're at that stage, you can get into your real fine details. Make those final decisions, outline everything much more cleanly. If you want to put a bit of shadow on there, you can also put some shadow, remembering that the shadows generally will have hard edges, so hard edges on all of those shadow shapes. Now, in terms of building up a face, let's just go through building up a face one more time too. So when you're starting off, you want to start off with a big circle. So big circle for the top of the head, and then the jaw is a couple of angles that are coming off the lower half of the big circle. The eyes are one eye width apart, which is the same as adult human normal proportions. But generally the eyes are going to be a bit bigger. And there's lots of different eye shapes that you can have as well. And I do think eyes tend to be the most expressive kind of part of the anime character, and usually the thing that you put the most detail into. So these were the ones that we did in our last session. Get rid of some of these. Not still showing, that should be showing. Nope, that one, yes. So different kind of eye shapes. You can have triangular eye shapes, you can have big rectangular eye shapes, or you can have trapezoid eye shapes, lots of variety. Noses and mouths though tend to be not much. So either just a little line or a stroke, or sometimes like a triangle. And it's pretty rare, I would say, that you have a character with like really full defined lips. Generally, you might see a bit of a top lip, you might see a bit of a bottom lip, but often you just see the line between them or the shape of the mouth. Yes, we just got another message from Kiai saying, can I show you my reference? I'd love to see your reference. And I got an email from, who's this one from? The email address is Achana, but I'm assuming that's someone's parent because it says Chief Financial Officer as well. So I don't think that's anyone here. Whose picture is this one? I haven't got it on my screen. I was just asking. Anyone? Let me bring it up. It's very good. Whose is this one? Anyone? Anyone going to claim this one? No? It's very good. I like it a lot. I assume it's taken from an existing character, or is this done from a reference? Anyway, whichever way, it's very nice. I like it. And you can see that thing I was talking about with the eyebrows and the eyes kind of going through the hair a little bit. That's pretty common. Very cute. And I think what I was saying before about if we're putting a little bit of shading, if we're putting a little bit of shading, you could also maybe put a little bit of shading underneath the hair, like around and behind the hair. Yes, there's a message in the chat. It's very good. Whoever did this drawing, good job. I agree. It's very good. And
thank you.
And then Kiahi sent the reference picture for your one. Yeah, that's great. It does look like you. This is the one that was a bit small, wasn't it? Let me just pull it up. This one. That is, nope, not that one. Not that one, not that one, not that one. Not that one. Oh, hang on, did I already close it? This is this one. Yeah, looks good. I actually thought it was this one I thought was a character from something. So you've done a good job making it look like a character. Excellent. All right. Well, it is just about 3:30. Nope, it's 3:30 now, according to my clock. So if there's any final questions, please let me know. And yeah, I hope you all enjoyed yourselves. I hope you all learned lots of stuff. And absolutely best wishes on your anime journey. Okay. Thank you. I've seen lots of thank yous. Thanks, everybody. I'll maybe see you next time. Or maybe see you in class. Bye.